Thursday night. Thanks. We're going to take a moment right now. We lost someone in ethical culture about a week ago, and we just found out today that Susan Rose died.
Oh.
Yes, Susan was at one time a member of the Brooklyn Society, also the Ethics Society. She lived in Boston. She was a certified ethical culture leader, and she helped lead the Ethical Society Without Walls, while she also more recently was our Dean of Leadership Training. I didn't know her very well, but many did. And so we had a request this evening, if we would just take a moment to remember a moment of silence, and we will find other ways to remember and honor this woman who did so much for ethical culture and who's now at peace. But let's take a moment right now and remember a friend. A minute is too short, but it's not the last minute that we'll spend remembering Susan and being grateful for what she did for us and with us. And now to turn to some of the business that we have left to discuss before assembly. Our topic is bylaws amendments and other motions. There were quite a few early on that were submitted by the deadline. I want to tell you that one has been withdrawn, and I've lost it. Here it is. This was the motion to amend the assembly discussion and voting procedures to establish a decision tree. This was going to make our process just a little bit more complicated, even as it probably would have been very helpful to our thinking and decision making. We just couldn't quite work it out. And the Washington Ethical Society has agreed with that idea and will be withdrawing that motion. The process, however, for withdrawing a motion means that we will still have this item on the agenda, and the delegates will have to approve, hopefully by consensus, that we do withdraw the motion. So when it comes up, this is intended to be withdrawn, but we can't quite take it out. Rachel, you have a question?
I'm also withdrawing the motion, the amendment that I submitted that Wes put forward for me.
Oh, well,
I really want to lean into a holistic bylaw approach, and in that spirit, I am withdrawing the motion.
okay, all righty. And but were that both of the motions, or there was
Yes, both of them.
the quorum as well as the code of conduct? Okay.
Correct. Thank you.
Good to know. Thank you very much for sharing that. And again, we'll also have to put both of those motions on the agenda as withdrawn and ask for the consent of the delegates to withdraw them. But hopefully that will be early practice for consensus, and we'll be very proud of ourselves for doing that. It's a good job. Speaking of which, when you go to the delegate webpage, you will find under, I believe, Well, it's either documents or it's, well, it's something. Sonia, quickly, I don't remember on the, I can't, and I've got too many windows open. Which page is it? There is a PDF file called consensus, and that is a policy that we've had for many years within the AEU of how we want to proceed forward with adopting things during assembly. If we can't reach consensus, we will vote, but first we'll try to have consensus, and we'll be using that process of consensus for, especially for these and probably other things. Sonia, did you?
Yeah, it's in the section called procedures.
Procedures. Oh, that's perfect. I knew it wasn't quite documents. So in procedures, that's a piece that's there. Okay. So for the remaining documents, and I probably need to mark through what I've got here. For the remaining documents that there are for motions and bylaws amendments, I've tried to categorize them in terms of what they're referring to. And I want to start with the issue of the second assembly, because we had a petition filed related to this, and we've had quite a bit of discussion about the petition and what it included and what it forgot and things like that. We did determine that it's a valid petition. It has the right number of signatures and it came in the right direction. And we did get the announcement out. We were a little bit late getting the announcement out, but there was patience on the part of Wes that we did do that, I hope. In any case, they acted like they were being patient. And we did notice that it didn't include time and it didn't specify place. Now, Wes has submitted a motion to the assembly that covers roughly the same territory, and they have modified it to include some of the very issues that we felt were not fully addressed in the petition. So problems, it looked like, are about to be solved. But let me tell you that we also, on my part, spent a bit of time talking to our mediation and law committee, trying to ascertain what the situation is in New York and whether or not we would all fit into the New York office. And a quorum of, at this point, I counted 27, but I hear it can go up to 35. Standing room only could get into that office. So if we had to, and the default was there, we can get in there. I also checked to see if Celebration Hall was going to be available, and so we're hoping, you know, you wouldn't have to stand there long. So NICEC will come to the rescue on that one. So that's just letting you know. And just hang on just a second, John, and let me finish this piece. That we also determined that, in fact, the New York law relating to virtual meetings was not revoked. It, in fact, is permanent now, and nonprofit organizations can choose to have virtual as well as hybrid meetings. And I have a link that I will try to put into the next mailing that goes out. But at this point, just to assure you that we did double check that, and we can meet by Zoom like that. Okay, now, John. Sorry, you're muted, and yeah.
I was going to point out what you just mentioned about the virtual meetings, but you already did so. But more importantly, I wanted to mention that the 12 signatories of the petition are in the process of conferring with one another. And we may, in the coming hours or days, be putting out an indication of our intention to withdraw the petition and just turn it over to the assembly to decide via the motion that we'll probably be talking about tonight. So more to come about that.
All righty, thank you for that update. Now I'm going to share my screen, and I hope my solitaire game doesn't pop up, but it involves elves, perhaps. Okay, this is the message that is hot off the press coming from Wes. I'll try to make it bigger if I can possibly do that. Give me a sec. It's no, I mean, oh,
Yes, at the bottom to your right, there's the
There it is.
Zoom. The Zoom symbol at the bottom.
Bottom,
It's not going bigger. That didn't work. Okay,
all
look,
the way to the right,
All the
Carol.
way to the right at the bottom.
Yes, down one more. Got it,
There you
girl.
go.
okay, I've got some things here. Let me just.
No, no, right there.
Got
There
it.
you go.
There's a lot of things open here. Sorry, I had to refer to them. All
No
right,
problem.
here, oops, that's too much of the good stuff. Here, they worked on their rationale and what they said, oh, let me be quiet. Sarah, it's your turn.
Thank
Are
you.
you there?
Karen.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I know you've got a lot going on today with the deadline today, so I can walk everyone through these amendments. So we submitted a revision to the West motion calling for a second assembly and setting the business of that assembly. The main points addressed by the revision are that it eliminates the suggestion in the rationale regarding the opportunity for new candidates to step forward, since it seems clear that that suggestion is divisive. I believe that, Wes has submitted amendments to our other motions about nominations and candidates that would have supported write-in candidates at the special, or that could have allowed write-in candidates at the special assembly, so that those changes would be would not take effect until 2024. So that's the first main point addressed by this set of amendments.
Right,
Secondly, it specifies that the special assembly would be held virtually. Sounds like that's
yes.
pretty much resolved.
Seeing
It
the,
also clarifies what procedures will be used and how delegates will be chosen. So they would be chosen using the same rules and procedures that are in effect for the upcoming July 29th meeting, allowing any changes to delegates to accommodate for schedule availability up until 1 week before the special assembly.
okay, so this,
Oh, sorry, there's one more.
yeah.
Should I keep going?
Oh, there's more, another page?
No, I'm sorry. One other main point addressed
Oh,
by
okay.
these revisions. It nullifies the motion if the Brooklyn Society's proposal passes,
Right,
because that would cause the director and officer elections to take place on the 29th.
right. Yeah, that, because we could have had 3 assemblies. That, yeah, uh-huh. Okay,
okay.
well done. All right, that is very responsive to what people have said. So the effect of this motion will be to postpone the election of directors and officers until September 23rd and postpone the approval of the budget until September 23rd.
Correct.
Let me offer, in the course of looking at this particular point with the budget, that we recalled last night in discussions of the budget that the various budgets that are part of the various scenarios have not been approved or vetted or recommended by the Finance Committee. So part of what you're doing there is allowing the Finance Committee a very brief time, but some time yet, to look more closely at the proposed budget. Okay,
And allowing people time to consider which candidates they prefer for the officer positions in light of the decision about the scenario.
okay,
So
Right.
it's spacing things out a bit to allow some breathing room.
and it looks like if people find out that their delegates are unavailable to attend in September, they can make changes in their delegate list, but not have to recruit a whole new set.
Correct.
Okay, I'm gonna leave this up there, but I think we could now open it up to any questions or discussion. I'm trying to make the gallery bigger. I don't see any hand. You'll have to use your Zoom hand or I'll never find you. Okay, Lee?
So just to understand the only thing then that would be decided in the July assembly would be the proposal. And then the elections would be, I'm sorry, the elections would be decided 2 months later on September 23rd. Is that correct?
Right,
That's the proposal.
right,
Okay, thank you.
right. We would also be considering bylaws amendments in July.
Oh,
Those-
okay, July, okay.
Okay, Rebecca?
Hi, I am wondering, sorry. There we go. I'm wondering if the Bergen proposal is chosen, as I understand it, the directors would be identified by each society because each society would send a delegate to the board so that there would not need to be board elections there. And if I'm understanding the Bergen proposal, which I don't guarantee I do, their budget would go along with their proposal. So I'm wondering if the Bergen proposal is chosen, do we really need a second assembly for these two purposes?
Sarah?
I am not sure. Sonia, do you have a thought on that?
That has a thought.
I do have a thought on that, which is that I don't remember what the Bergen proposal says about the selection of officers and how that would take place, but that may still be relevant. And also, I think we learned last night that there may be some refinement of the budget associated with the Bergen Society's plan that could be conducted in the intervening time to allow us to pass a budget that, you know, had been thoroughly reviewed.
Yeah, time for the Finance Committee. Eric has some information for us.
Sure, thank you. So just to recap what the Bergen amendment proposal is, as you note, it would establish the board as consisting of one representative from each society. The Bergen proposal does have some minor changes to the way officers are selected. So I think officers would still have to be selected under a process that's similar to what we have now, which is to say there's a board development committee which serves as a nominating committee and would continue its work. At least that's under the Bergen proposal as currently constituted.
So the officers would be elected at large and the directors would be selected by their respective societies.
Correct. And in the absence of a director being selected under, you know, the individual society's rules, then the president of that society would serve as the director.
Default to the president. Okay. Well, we're going to cover that in just a second and go back over it again. But in terms of the need for a second assembly, it may well be that that's still something that is needed just to go through the transition process, both with election and with budget. And I think that was the intention of this motion, at least, and the things that are there. Originally, okay, I'm sorry if I'm cutting. Any other comments or questions? We can always come back, but for now, just moving through how I've slightly reorganized this. Originally, in planning the agenda for the meeting, I had thought that all of the discussions about assembly should happen in one place and one time on the agenda. The Brooklyn proposal has a paragraph that leads toward a second assembly, maybe a third now, on December the 16th. And I had thought to pull that out as a separate paragraph, that would be then a motion that should be voted on at the same time. So you would be comparing these two motions simultaneously. After conferring with advisors on the legal committee, the thought is it's more fairer to everyone who's proposed scenario, that all of the scenarios be voted on together. And that in fact, at the beginning of the agenda, we will have the scenarios before we go to some of the other kinds of activities. So Brooklyn's proposal for a second assembly, if it passes, Wes has now indicated that if it passes, their proposal for an assembly is mooted. It won't happen. So I think we're not going to conflict in this process. So it's smoothed out very nicely. So when we talk about the Brooklyn scenario, when the Brooklyn scenario is discussed, its proposal, if that whole scenario passes, will then take effect for a second assembly. Okay, so that moves us to the organization of the board. And there's only one motion right now that is proposed to relate to that. That's the one that Eric just mentioned. This comes from Bergen. We had initially thought that this was an implementing proposal, but as we looked at it more closely, we realized this is a standalone proposal. And so whether Brooklyn's scenario passes or not, this is a motion to amend the bylaws to change the structure of the AEU board. And it's going to take me a minute, Eric, to find it, to be able to pull it up. But if you want to talk about that for a moment, at some point, I'll actually have something to show. Maybe.
Sure, and I can take a quick look and see if I can bring it up.
Yeah, I've got it.
You've got it?
No, I got all kinds of things here. Too many things. Here it is. No. Okay, sorry. I scrunched my screen down and now I can't read all the titles, so it's going to take me a minute. Bergen, motion to amend the bylaws. Sorry, I should have read it. There it is. This is the one we're talking about now. We're not going to talk about the other one until we get to that in a little bit. So just the Article 3, Section 2, changing the composition of the board.
Carolyn,
you.
are we supposed to be seeing something?
Do what now? Oh, it would help if I shared it.
Carolyn, you're doing great.
Love you,
Take a breath.
Carolyn.
Take a
Love
breath.
you.
Take a breath.
Yeah.
There you go. Somebody's, oh no, I don't know what that is. Okay, are you seeing pictures of my family under the tree?
No.
No,
No, we see that.
okay, that's good.
I'm gonna stop messing with it.
Good. And hopefully everyone can read that. I mean, really, it's fairly simple, right? I mean, it replaces that rather than go piecemeal, word by word, etc. Essentially what this does is it takes us forward to a situation that really reflects the reality of what the AEU is and should be. There was some discussion recently talking about the AEU as a different organization or as a separate organization or as an organization that has some independence from the member organizations, the different societies that compose it. What this really does is it says it reverses by and large changes that were made in 2006 to create a small at-large board of directors who do not individually represent the different societies. What we have right now is we have a board, I think, comprised of 11 people. They are all members of the different societies, but they are not representing those separate societies. And in fact, the Bergen Society, while we have a member who is on the board, does not represent the society, the Bergen Society on that board. And our liaison to the board is Zia, who I see is on our call tonight. But again, I don't expect Zia to be able to fully serve as the liaison and speak to the Bergen Society's issues, nor do I expect her to come and speak to our board as to, give them an update on what's going on at the AEU. So what this proposal will do, as I say, it gets us back to our congregational polity, which is to say there's no higher authority, if you will, than the individual societies. And the AEU is where we come together as a group to take common action, to network, to coordinate, to identify best practices, yes, and to share resource, whether that's resource of training, experience, even funding. And as you can see, that's represented as we talk about the Bergen proposal. This is an essential part of the overall Bergen proposal for the future of the AEU. And I think it speaks for itself. As I say, it's written in such a way that it is consistent with the language of the changes that were made in 2006 when we went from a representative board to this, what I consider to be a non-representative board. And so it really, by and large, just reverses those changes. And I'm happy to take any questions people have about this proposed change.
So this would be, you've dated this rather fortuitously, the fiscal year ending September 30th. So if the election were postponed until September 23rd, this would still be valid?
Yes.
I'll be
I
doggone.
mean, I see this again being going into effect immediately,
Ah,
right?
yes, okay.
So beginning with elections held at the annual assembly,
Uh-huh.
right, in the fiscal year ending. So again, that just defines the year. That's sort of an open, leaves open for the different dates of the potential assembly.
Whenever elections are held, okay.
Right. But you'll see that's the same language that is in our current bylaws that says essentially beginning with elections held at the annual assembly in the fiscal year ending on September 30th, 2006. That's what our current bylaws say. So this just updates them
All right.
using that same language.
All right, so this provides for selection of directors through the current process, but adds that at the same time, this is going to happen in the societies. It puts term limits of up to 6 years on continued service to the board. And if there is a vacancy because the society doesn't have a representative, it might default to the president or simply remain vacant, depending on the circumstances of the society. Okay, Rebecca.
Sorry, but I have kind of the same issue here, and I'm wondering, I mean, it's come up because of the issue before. So in Austin, we elect our directors or the equivalent to directors, but then those elected directors appoint or elect the officers. And if we have 22 directors, every society being represented there, I'm wondering what people might think about changing the bylaws, which would require a change in what is being presented here, to allow the directors, all 22 of them, to decide on who the officers would be. I guess I'm just throwing that out generally, but certainly to Eric, would he consider doing that? And those of you who have been on the AU board, what do you think about that possibility?
And I'll be glad to briefly respond because I have seen some proposals to make amendments to these to this particular proposal along those lines. That is to say, to have a different process for electing officers from amongst the directors, changing the amount or percentage that a quorum would be. I'm not opposed to those things, but I did not feel that I had, unfortunately, this is something that I would have to take back to my board because this was proposed and approved by the Bergen Society, by our board of directors, and submitted to the AEU. So I don't feel like I can, have the authority to accept that friendly amendment, but I would be glad to consider that, and I think that that's something that, again, may be useful as a further discussion, especially in light of the fact that there's talk about having a more holistic overview or review of our bylaws. And again, for me, if there's going to be that type of holistic review of our bylaws, I would prefer that that be done by the committee representing all of the different societies rather than a subset of individuals who are not necessarily representing any particular society.
Very good. Anthony, you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I mean, I do, and right now I don't know actually to who is directed to specifically, but I keep hearing for the past few days the word congregational polity being invoked over and over again. But in practice, this has been the practice of congregations at the AU in general. So I don't know what we are going back to if we're invoking a 2006 kind of amendment. I mean, we already operate in a congregational model, congregationalist polity, and we choose to come together as an assembly to make votes on things that are impacting, right, our respective societies and the movement at large. So I just need clarity.
Sure. Well, I think what you'll see is that this. Oh, go
And
ahead.
how would that be in relationship to, for example, if we're basically housing the AU or its new iteration at Bergen, how do we also keep power in balance, balances in power, given that we are there? Potentially.
Thank you. Thank you. I would say, first of all, there's no intention that the AEU is housed at Bergen. In fact, Bergen is throughout this. I mean, we've said that we're willing to provide resource and leadership, but this is not the Bergen takeover of the AEU in any way, shape, or form. I hope you understand. What we're really trying to do is to diffuse power back to all of the different societies. Whether the AEU continues to operate out of the New York Society or building, or has some other location, that's a decision that should be made by all of the societies coming together in that way. When I say that it's a congregational polity, what I mean is that each congregation is its own independent entity and does not. We don't answer up like some churches answer up to a bishop or up to a presbytery or something like that. We don't. Each society is complete and entire unto itself. And where we as individual societies come together, that's where the AEU exists, in my mind, not as an independent organization that has either some necessarily authority over the individual societies or that speaks for or tries to set some type of policy or specific, expectations.
Thank you. We have three more questions, Sue and then Condra.
Okay, one sort of a comment, rather, what about different organizations, different societies have different fiscal years? Like Chicago goes the calendar year, but the AU is October 1 to September 30. How do you rectify that with your proposal? And then as a secondary question, what happens to the President's Council, which is not in the bylaws and has served as a sounding board for many things?
Thank you. So the president of each society would serve as the director and representative of that society until such time as that individual society, within its own, again, operating procedures, determines that a person names an individual to represent them to that AEU board. As for the President's Council, instead of being, a quote advisory council, as you've said, it doesn't really exist anywhere other than as a listserv and a monthly meeting. But this would give a real, I think, authority and responsibility and ownership to that President's Council. And until such time as the different societies select someone other than the president, that President's Council would in effect become the board of directors of the AEU. Would be able to have decision-making authority rather than merely, again, being a place to discuss and provide feedback. That President's Council would take the real responsibility for the operations and the leadership of the AEU.
Whoa. Okay, Condra.
Hi, good evening. So my question is with respect to governance and accountability. And a lot has been made of sort of the dysfunction of the AAU board and the toxicity. And I guess I'm wondering how, looking at the context where we are now, right? What this looks like with this composition, especially given sort of the position of leadership that has come out of Bergen and the way it's presented itself, right? Board members are currently not supposed to represent their societies, but we've had Bergen, or the board member who's from Bergen, essentially threatened the board that Bergen would leave if it didn't adopt the proposal. There was no accountability for that. You yourself have made accusations on the president listserv, right? Bringing sort of that toxicity in. And I guess my concern is you're now expanding the board and there are no guidelines. There's no code of conduct. And this organization does not have a practice of holding people accountable for negative actions. And so I guess has your board and leadership sort of thought about how it would move forward, given the reticence to like talk things through, work things through? How do you see this actually working, given the current climate of this organization?
Thank you. I think that's a great question. And, I mean, I can get into the specifics around the toxicity of the board as I understand it. I think I have a very different perspective than you, but I will say that Dwight is not the Bergen representative to the board. He's an at-large member of the board. He should not be speaking for the Bergen Society on the board. Our liaison to the board is Zia. And so, again, unfortunately, that's the channel that we have for communications to the board, to the current board. And I have to say, no disrespect intended, I don't feel like we really have been heard on the board. I do know that, we have some issues to discuss around things like actions taken to kick Dwight off of the board, which, whether he was a member of the Bergen Society or not, I think is indicative of the dysfunction that this proposal is designed to get rid of and to eliminate. Again, by creating a larger group and avoiding what to me seems to be a steering committee, somewhat self-appointed, to take the AEU in a specific direction that is at variance, at least with our society.
Okay, thank you. And John, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I have a question. Hi, Eric.
Hi, John.
So I imagine you feel as I do, the idea that the board of the AEU, as the bylaws say, exists to act on behalf of the assembly between assembly meetings, and is a way that is a forum to ensure that that the AEU is serving its constituents well. And I imagine that's part of the idea of having lots of people there. Does that capture part of your intent, that you have a board that does serve in that role, to serve the assembly between meetings?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it raises a good point, right? Which is that you can take a look at this and see it to some degree as a bicameral governance, right? We have the one society, one vote process on the board. But then when we come together as the assembly, we come together with the proportional representation. The larger societies have, a proportionate say vis-a-vis the smaller. But again, even there, the smaller societies are protected because no matter how small, each society does have representation. So a society with 20 members has the same representation as a society with 50 members. So again, I think that what we're talking about here does help to balance those different interests. And again, the AEU board, composed of all a representative from each society, I think, again, it will be acting on behalf of that larger assembly, and it will be more representative of that larger assembly as a bigger group.
Okay, that wasn't my question, though. I just wanted to kind of confirm that, because that's all well and good, except that your proposal, like a couple of others, has this very large board that meets only once per quarter. And I'm just trying to picture how a meaningful sort of leadership can occur with power distributed so widely in a meeting with 23 people plus the officers meeting only once per quarter. How would that
Well,
work?
I'll say it's a minimum of once per quarter, but in fact, the President's Council now meets monthly. And so I think that, the President's Council could in fact easily be reconfigured to serve as the President's Council / board. That is to say, a President's Council with governance capabilities and responsibilities.
Let me just add, we're getting close to halfway through our time for this evening, so we want to keep things sort of succinct. But at this point, this bylaw amendment is separated from the proposal, the scenario proposal. And so this can pass by itself without the scenario ever passing. Just you might just to make that note that it won't, it's not necessarily directly tied to the scenario. It could be tied to the SVS proposal, if that's how the delegates end up deciding. So this section, the reason I'm saying that is because this section I can't see that it mentions the number of meetings that the board would have at this size. So just saying that. Okay.
I believe it's specified elsewhere as a minimum number of meetings per year. But again, I think that, that's
the 5 meetings per year minimum. Okay. So Laura, and then Anthony, and then Anya, and then I think we need to wrap this section up if we can. Laura.
So I just have a quick point of information with a question. My understanding is that what happened in 2006 was a result of the dysfunction of the AAU board, partly because it was too big. And I would like to hear how you reconcile those two things.
Sure. Well, I think the way we do that is by, giving direction and having a plan. And rather than having 23 or however many different societies all kind of wandering around looking for a purpose and looking for a unifying, motivating factor, that we have. I mean, I think this is very much tied to the energy of the proposed plan by Bergen to, again, to help to have the AEU really be a network service organization. And I think when it's tied to a real plan, then I think you'll see that people start moving in the same direction.
Well, with all respect, that doesn't speak to how it functions.
So again, how it would function would be as any board, that is to say, motions would be proposed, discussed, voted, tabled if agreement can't be reached. I'd be happy to include and develop as part of a holistic overview or overhaul of our bylaws to have a more consensus-oriented approach. I think that's also has a lot to recommend it. But I think that's part of the type of bylaws review and holistic overhaul that should be conducted by all of the societies together and not by a group of people independent from those larger body of societies.
Is that okay, Laura? You have more?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. And Anthony, then Anya, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I'll let Anya go first.
All right, Anya.
Hi. Yeah, so I guess I'm curious with this bylaw change, Eric, what the intention is to hold board members accountable when they misstep, being that the President's Council isn't too much more functional than the board of the AEU. I'm curious what your vision is for how we deal with conflict in that scenario.
Sure. Well, I can't speak to, the past operations of the President's Council. I can speak to the President's Council since I've been on it the last 2 months. I think some people may have taken offense at questions that I raised about spending $7,000 on a legal opinion to see if they could kick a fellow director off of the board. I think I had some questions about intervention in the Bergen Society's program and personnel matters that we raised to the board of directors. And not only was there no response, there was not even an investigation of the matter that we very politely and courteously asked questions about. What is the process for intervention in the Bergen, in any society's programming? Because frankly, I think that the AEU and its personnel, in particular, its interim executive director, overstepped and created liability for the AEU, for all of us, by intervening in the personnel matters of a separate organization, the Bergen Society. And all we did was ask, what was the process for this type of thing to happen if a complaint comes in? And again, we've been rebuffed. So if you want to talk about accountability, I'm happy to talk about accountability. I've raised questions. People thought they were accusations, but frankly, you could put those accusations to rest very easily by just simply responding.
Eric, that didn't actually answer my question about how you would handle it in the future, but thank you for all of that information.
Sure.
Okay. We were hoping to wrap up this section. Is the question, the hands are up for Hank and Condra and Rachel, specifically on this bylaw amendment? And
I'm just going to say, Carolyn, because you spent a lot of time, the board actually talked about this, and I think it's really disrespectful to you and the rest of the board to suggest that we didn't respond, because we did invite Bergen to talk.
Well, unfortunately, you did not even look at the emails in question. So it's the response, I think, was ill-informed at best.
okay. All right. Thank you for the comments.
This is exactly why we need to implement this resolution.
Hank or Rachel, is this on this bylaws amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
As probably the only one in the room who served on the board when we had representatives of all the societies. At that time, we had an executive committee that handled the day-to-day activities and served a function similar to the board, except then changes of significance were both proposed and ratified by every society board, which at that point had, in addition to representatives from the society, the elected executive committee and all the leaders. But the question of how you get people to act responsibly in carrying this out, I think is a question of mentoring, of when people step out of line, letting them know that it is the feeling of how they are affecting other people. But in any case, I'm just saying that when we did have the large board, we needed an executive committee to do the more routine things that could not be wait for quarterly meetings.
Very
Right.
good.
And those quarterly meetings were in person at the time, I think. So it's probably a little bit easier to have a quarterly or even monthly meetings now and handle the affairs without the need for an executive committee. But we would still have officers, a president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary that would have some specific authorities.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And Rachel?
Hey, thanks. I just wanted to say well, two things. One is the regeneration proposal provides an opportunity for expanding the role of delegates to be part of the working with the OD and with the teams, and really will do a lot of the training and mentoring that Hank just mentioned, and a lot of the creating communication processes, accountability processes for an entire year. And then next year, if this is actually a good experiment and people actually have grown and evolved, then you can make this a voting body, right? Because you will have evolved and created a more mature body. And so I just want to say that to kind of jump into that without having any process in place, any mentoring, any training in the midst of crisis, because you are in crisis, seems a little bit audacious, to say the least, or in denial at the worst. So I think the accountability piece that you keep saying we don't have, Eric. Obviously, we don't have an accountability piece.
Not if you're trying to kick people off the board, vote people off the board.
I have no power to do that, obviously. And so I don't know why you would say that to me, because maybe because you already slandered me in your comment before, but let's not talk about that now.
Yeah, thanks. Let's
Okay.
not. I mean, thank you both for your input. We do want to just look at the bylaws amendments proposal, and it's valid to ask questions about how they're going to function, what they're going to accomplish. And we may have disagreements, but when we come to the meeting on July 29th, there are two possibilities, yes and no. And so we'll find out then, where the consensus is and where the group goes. Anthony, is there something directly related to that? We have 30 minutes left in our program and 4 more motions to consider.
I will wait, but it was just my hand went down somehow. But as you had seen, it was up.
Okay, yes.
But I will wait.
Well, okay, I don't want to cut you off from discussing this, but is it, if it's essential, we certainly would like to hear your comment. Okay, we'll try. Sorry. Leave it up and you'll be ready next time. It'll be okay. So sorry. All right. So if that's it for reorganization of the board, but we have 2 very similar proposals, one from Bergen and one from Wes, having to do with how officers in particular, but Wes also has how directors are nominated. They have two motions related to that. The Bergen proposal is basically as the bylaws currently state, but that it has help me, Eric. This has to do with how the officers are elected, and has to do with that transition period. And that's why I think where questions are coming up on this. Give us a thumbnail, if you will, because Wes is going to present theirs together. Oh, and let me just say, you're doing this paragraph here, C right here, is very much like the West paragraph on write-in candidates for officer, but they're suggesting 25 signatures rather than 30 signatures. And maybe before you leave tonight, you could talk to them and come up with a compromise on the number that might be that separate these two and keep them together. But sorry, let's stop talking and give us a quick thumbnail on this.
Sure. Well, I mean, really, it's, by and large, the Board Development Committee continues to have responsibility for identifying, nominating, and proposing officers. But what this essentially does is it changes from 50 signatures across 5 different societies. It does make it easier for write-in candidates, people who might not, be part of what may be an institutional. I know we've heard that people feel that they're shut out from leadership. And so the intention of this is to make it easier for people to propose themselves or to find alternate ways to run for those leadership positions by reducing the number of signatures from 50 across 5 societies to 30 across 3 societies.
Now, let me just make the comment while I'm switching over to the West proposals. In an earlier review a couple of weeks ago, discussing our bylaws with an attorney, the comment was made that our bylaws are not very open in allowing new voices and new people to participate. And so this area of the write-in was really very tightly restricted. And there are some slight differences between your proposal, which did do a good job of reducing the onerous requirement of 50 signatures to 30. But Sarah, if she's still here, I've lost everybody.
I'm here.
There you are. Hi. May want to tell us, this is your bylaws amendment with write-in for directors, followed by write-in candidates for officers. And if you want to cover both of them, these all seem to be in the same ballpark right now.
Correct. Carolyn, I wonder, I hate to ask this, are you able to pull up the revised version that I emailed to you this morning?
I thought this was it. And it's
No, the revised one has blue text.
I'm going to
at the
stop
bottom.
sharing so you don't see my card game, and I'll see, because I do have that. I just,
And I can walk through what it is. It's
there it
basically.
is. I got it. I got it.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Let me just hold the fort. Now I've lost the sharing capacity. Oh, there it is.
So
This
the
is so
amendment,
exciting to get
the
on.
amendment, the
There we go.
amendment that we submitted today affects the
All right, no, this is not.
the date on which these changes become effective. And it stipulates that they would become effective January 1st, 2024. So to.
Okay,
remove
I blew it. Just give me a second. I'm still looking for it. I don't know. Second assembly, we don't want that.
Carolyn, I wonder whether you could let Sarah talk while you bring it up.
Here it is. I'm sorry. No.
Sarah, Carolyn, could you mute yourself while you're looking so Sarah can just walk
Oh,
you
because
through
I
it?
talked to myself. I'm so sorry. It's
Thank you.
one of the worst things in the world. Yes, and I did find it, but go, Sarah. Sorry.
Okay, so these changes, the changes, sorry. The amendments that Wes submitted today simply affect the effective date of the proposed changes. And our amendment from today stipulates that these changes would take effect January 1st, 2024, to remove any question or concern about whether these changes would affect the upcoming election, if there were to be an election held at a second assembly rather than on the 29th. So that change was applied to all three of the submitted motions to change the bylaws.
And an important change in this is to allow for these write-in candidates to submit their candidacy within 1 week of the publication of the slate. Right now, it had to come in prior to the publication of the slate, and sometimes the publication of the slate is an impetus for more action. Sonia.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on these proposed bylaws amendments. First of all, I completely support the idea of a holistic review of the bylaws and total revision. However, I think it's still valuable to pass these, because if a holistic review does not in fact take place before next year's assembly, this would improve the ability of a broader range of candidates to potentially serve in whatever positions are available under the, whatever positions turn out to be available. I was originally motivated to write these because I did write these, right? My original, like the first time that I thought about writing bylaws amendments like this, it was when I saw a slate of candidates who were in fact not at all diverse. And I became aware that there was a desire on the part of someone who was younger and more diverse to run, but they had missed the deadline. And that is actually the situation that originally caused me to go, this part of the bylaws is wrong. I know that because of the timing, a lot of people, seem to believe that I would have written these because I had some opposition to the slate of candidates that it turned out were in fact running this year. And I just want to clarify that that's not at all the case. I actually think these candidates are great. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. And these would all become effective on January 1, 2024. Okay, Hank, you have comments, questions?
Yeah. On the threshold for electing officers, it says that if there's a single candidate and the single candidate doesn't get a majority of the votes, the candidate is not elected. But it doesn't, unless I have an outdated state version, it doesn't say what happens next.
That's the next one we're going to consider separately. This was just about the write-in candidates. There were 3 proposals related to write-in candidates, so we were just looking at them all together. But we'll go to the single candidate in just a moment. So hold that thought. We'll be right back. Condra, did you have a comment on the write-in candidates?
So I guess my question is for Sonia, then why, given all of these amendments, some of the similarities, why not charge the board, whoever gets elected, to prioritize an overhaul of the bylaws so that we have a document that is, consistent with how we want to govern ourselves and the goals and mission of the organization, and sort of really put a lot more thought into what we want the organization to look like and how we want it to govern.
So Condra, I think that's an awesome idea, right? And I think that, obviously, if a wholesale rewrite of the bylaws takes place, then these will be irrelevant, right? Because the wholesale rewrite would supersede that. I have believed for a long time that the current bylaws were not serving us very well, and I'm totally in favor of a rewrite.
I believe it was on the agenda this year. Okay, any other questions or comments about these particular write-in candidates? Well, now, Hank, we'll go to the one you're talking about. If there's only, Sonia, you had.
Sorry, if I could just say one more thing about them. The distinction for the officers between the 25 signatures versus the 30 signatures that are proposed by Bergen, I tend to prefer a smaller number, just because I would like for the candidate, I would like for someone who would like to run to not have to jump through even more hoops than necessary in order to get those additional signatures. But I don't have a major problem with Bergen's 30 vote threshold either, or 30 signature threshold either.
What if there's a chance to chat before midnight? Eric, if you're up for it, if you could.
Again, I'm happy to talk with anyone about anything, but I feel that I'm responsible to my board that passed these, so I can't speak. I don't have the authority to speak for them.
Well, you may be able to.
But it seems like it's close enough. And again, I see the bylaws being somewhat, changeable in that regard. I mean, certainly if people feel like 25 is a better number, I wouldn't oppose it in a future discussion.
All righty. Okay. Well, we'll just see how the cards play out. Thank you, Eric. And thank you, Sonia. All right, Hank, this is the one you were referring to that has, if we have a candidate, just one candidate, and then there will be, it has to have a majority of yes votes in order to be elected. Sarah, do you want me to be quiet so you can talk about this one? Don't say, no, I asked that wrong. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sure, I can review it, and then in anticipation of Hank's question, I don't know the answer. So if anybody else who's familiar with this proposed amendment wants to jump in. So this revision, so currently the bylaws state that the candidate receiving the highest number of votes shall be elected. So that means that when only one candidate is running for office, it's currently impossible to fail to elect that individual unless every single delegate votes against them. So it's difficult to imagine a situation in which the majority of delegates would not vote to elect the only candidate running for the office. It is a defect in the bylaws that should be corrected. And the solution that we propose is that language in the red that you see there. In the event that only one candidate appears on the ballot for a position, a majority of votes cast is required to elect the candidate.
Okay, and Hank, what are your thoughts there?
I would suggest you add a sentence. If no candidate, if a majority of votes is not, if a person running does not get a majority of votes, the position would be filled by a vote of the board of directors.
Yeah. Okay, is that already in the
Yeah,
bylaws?
that provision already exists in the bylaws. If an officer position is vacant, it's filled by the board. I wanted to reiterate that I also wrote this one. And this one, when I wrote it, I wasn't thinking about this year's election in the slightest. I just was already in that section of the bylaws because I was looking at that other stuff. And it was an issue that came up in last year's assembly meetings. I believe Joan Johnson Lewis asked a question at one of the meetings. No, it wasn't Joan. I forget who asked the question. Someone else asked a question. Well, you know, so-and-so is running unopposed. What happens if the majority of people don't vote for them? And the answer was they still get elected. And I think most people, when they looked at that last year, actually thought that was ridiculous, right? That a person ought to have to meet a minimum bar of getting the majority of delegates to vote for them in order to actually be elected. And of course, like, I can't imagine this ever coming up, but they should have to meet that minimum bar.
Okay. Hank, we think that the provision is already there in the bylaws. I'm going to look for it when I stop sharing so you can see it, but it may be that this is already taken care of if a candidate does not, if there's a vacancy in the office.
Even if it is there, I think it should be put in at this point.
Okay.
It does raise the question, and I think it would not. I think it would be better if the people making it, the resolution would accept it as a friendly amendment. I support the intent to say, in that case, the position would be filled by a vote by the board of directors.
So if Wes will make that decision before midnight on the friendly amendment, send it in.
Yeah, we're happy to consider it. My hesitation would be, I think it's in general a bad idea to say the same thing in two different places in the bylaws, because then when you revise them, if it doesn't get fixed in both places, then you've got internal contradictions. So that would be my only reason for not wanting to do that.
Yeah.
Here.
All right. All righty. Okay, so they'll think about it, but it looks like they may not be ready to make that change, Hank. But it's a good point.
Maybe we could add language that refers to the section where that issue is addressed.
That's a thought.
Okay, I mean, that would be fine. The board would elect a candidate in accordance with section so-and-so.
Well, there are references like that in the bylaws. Maybe it's an editorial change we can make, like we're going to do on a parentheses. I'll ask and see. Lee,
This might be a really dumb question, but what if there's nobody else running, but people don't want the person that's been in that position?
that's what this is about.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't they have to, what would be the choice? If you don't want that person and there's nobody else running, I do understand that somebody from the board could take it, but what prevents that person from automatically getting the position?
That's what this bylaws amendment is about, so that they're not automatically elected. They have to, if there are 25 votes, they have to get 13 in favor. If they get 13 no's, then they're not elected.
Got it. So if they get 3 vote yeses and there's 25 people, then they're not going to get it.
There's a signal there, right?
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. John, you're muted.
Thank you. I guess I want to partly just comment on Lee's question, and it's a bit of a commentary on the motion that I didn't hear about it until after it was submitted. I think that if you don't have enough people running, or people who don't get enough support, the answer I don't think is some sort of legislative arithmetic solution. I think the solution is to look at the crisis of voluntarism in our movement, and to look at how unpleasant it is to be on the board, and to figure out how you make that better. It becomes more attractive and people want to run. So that's my
That's a good
2
point.
cents.
Yes, and as we have discussed before, contested elections are very healthy for democracy. It's a good thing. So the more candidates, the better for all of this, is where we are. Okay. All right, that's the amendments related to the election nomination of the board. And then the last 2 amendments that we have been withdrawn. One relates to the quorum, changing the quorum for board meetings, and the second relates to the code of conduct. Now that was withdrawn. That was proposed by Rachel and given into discussion by Wes. So we're going to have to make sure that Wes is agreeing to the withdrawal of those 2 motions. And they will, just as the earlier motion that had to do with the decision tree, they will still have to be on the agenda to allow the delegates to approve the removal of the items from the agenda. But we'll get there. Rachel.
Just one small point. At the last amendments meeting, Sarah did say that these amendments were not endorsed by Wes. So I think we have that on video. We know.
All righty. So want to say it again, Sarah?
To clarify, what I said was that the West membership and board agreed to submit the proposed motions, but that submission should not be interpreted as an endorsement. I didn't take a position on endorsement or no endorsement.
So it's almost an assumption, but we better not assume that Wes would be happy with this, and we'll find out on the 29th for sure. We'll work our way through that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here's where we stand. I'm going to stop sharing and try to concentrate just a little. Oh, John, sorry. Hi, missed you.
This time it's me.
Oh, Abby, hi.
Yep. So I did, regarding the attitude of Wes, there was broad agreement on the board that these amendments should come to the floor for discussion and voting. And so there's something to be said for whether we want to withdraw them or not. That said, I mean, yeah, I don't know that it's in our interest to press them either, but we did make a positive decision that they should be voted on.
Absolutely. That was a pro-democracy decision, I believe. So well done. Okay. We have now, this is the end. Midnight tonight is the deadline for any amendments that would be submitted. I'm standing by, but I believe that most of our amendments have already come in. Even so, there's still a couple of hours left. We're going to make sure that these get put on the delegate website. We have created also a listserv for delegates, and I think probably the thing would be to just go ahead and send the amended copies directly to you, and you can pick and choose whether or not you want to download them or print them out. But let's make sure everybody gets what the latest version is of all of the amendments. And you are free to discuss these on that listserv, although we can't propose amendments on that will actually hope to get passed during the meeting. At this point, this will be the end of the amendments, and we'll have to vote yes or no on them and see where we are. There will be a training session, hopefully making this all even clearer, on the 27th. We have not yet had time to discuss the possibility of a second training session, but that one will be recorded, and we'll probably have at least the raw recording available for those of you who need it. I'm told by the voting support team, Sonia Coopers, Chris Kamen, and Bill All, who have a lot of work ahead of them in the next week or so, that when the training happens, you will get to see the actual ballots and have a gander at what you're going to be voting on during the meeting. Hopefully it'll be just really smooth and easy. At that point, I have, Avandra, you have a question?
Yes, actually, I wanted just to see, Carolyn, if you could just review again what you think is going to happen on the 29th, and what would happen at September 23, and then the potential for something later in November, which I think comes from Brooklyn.
Okay, that's exciting. On the 29th, we will take care of some regular business, like approving the minutes from last time. We will also look at the important work that we've done on proposing multiple scenarios. Those scenarios will be voted on. While we use consensus as much as possible, those will use ranked choice voting. And that's a process that is very scientific, but still beyond my abilities to understand entirely. So we have our voting support team to take care of that. And I'm told that it's electronic, it's going to be smooth, and we'll know.
It's going to be AI.
It's yes, AI. No AI, but like it, only different kind of thing. So that will happen. We will be voting, and that will happen by ranked choice voting. Then we need to make sure that we're clear about what happens next. And depending on which scenario has come up, we still, whether we want to or not, willy-nilly, it's gonna happen. We have to look at the items that have been withdrawn. We have to look at the proposals for a second assembly. We will deduce as we look at those proposals that, oh, we don't need an assembly on the 23rd of September. Oh, yes, we must have one on the 23rd of September. Or no, we need to postpone the 23rd of December stuff and put it all into December 16th. It will depend on how that ranked choice vote goes. And fortunately, there will be a team of people making sure that we interpret the numbers correctly and come through for it. Plus, all of those numbers, all of those votes will be public-ish. They will be available. You can see the numbers for yourselves. Maybe not that very second, but they will be available. So you'll see how, yes, Sonia, get me out of this hole.
And
Yeah,
then, I'm sorry, then where are the votes for
We're,
the board of
we'll,
directors?
we'll get there. Sonia just saw me step in a hole, so
Yeah.
she's gonna get me out of the pothole and then I'll come back again and keep walking.
I just want to clarify that your votes are anonymous.
Yes.
However,
Oh, thank you.
it's however, it will be possible, to audit like how many votes there were for different things. Yeah.
Audit's an excellent word, and check it out. So transparency for as much as we can make on everything to make sure that we're all feeling that we trust the process. Okay, so after we have decided whether or not we're going to need another assembly, we do that. Those votes may say, okay, we're not really going to go into a formal process on the budget. Or they might say, oh, we're not going to go into a formal process on the election. Or everything goes down in flames and we're going to do the budget and we're going to do the election. And we're going to do all of that before we get to the bylaws amendments, so that no matter what passes for a bylaws amendment, it won't affect what is happening, what our current situation is. So we're not changing the rules of the game in the middle of the game. At that point, then we have to consider what might be happening on the next day. That day is Sunday. There's an all society platform. Please come. The next day is August the 1st, and that's when the rubber meets the road on whatever scenario is proposed. However, we have managed to do our elections, however, we've managed to do our budget. There's going to be, I think, not a lot of vacation time in August because a lot of stuff has to get done, especially if we will have that September assembly. It's a lot of work, but goodwill, working together, consensus, all those good things, or chocolate. People, thank you. Oh, Laura, go ahead. Oh, look at you. Laura? That's your hand, Laura.
Unmute.
Laura, you're muted.
Unmute.
I got it. Sorry. I can't imagine that the time that's already scheduled is going to be enough. Can you?
Yeah, it's a problem. We start at 11 o'clock Eastern. Pack a lunch. We believe that there may be some voting periods where we just have to, because we can't, as in the past, we've said, oh, they're just going to be one ballot for all this stuff, and you can vote until 10 o'clock at night, and we'll tell you tomorrow what the results are. But some of these things we have to know right away. We can't make some of our decisions without knowing what our other decisions are. So we may have, if we're lucky, a 10-minute break, go get a cup of coffee, come back, vote first, and then get your coffee, and then we'll have the results. It could be longer, which is why it's really good to do a reality check with your members and your delegates to make sure everybody's got what they need. Are they all set up for this? The training session on Thursday night is going to be important, but helping each other is also going to be a piece of what's there to make sure it works. Sonia?
Yeah, I just want to comment that it was pointed out to me that one of the most critical skills that delegates need in order to be able to participate fully in this meeting and to vote is the ability to view the Zoom meeting and deal with their email on a web browser at the same time. Because you need to be able to go into your email, find your ballot, click on it, and cast your vote in a web browser and still be able to find the Zoom meeting again. We will go over some ways to do that in the delegate training, but we may not cover every situation that's relevant to every person who's a delegate. So I would strongly encourage you, if you're a delegate, to, like, if you have questions about whether that's a skill that you have, maybe between now and the delegate training meeting, get some help from another member of your society, from a relative, whatever, on that task of switching between different programs on your computer or device.
Yeah. And maybe don't
How
be
many
driving.
programs? How many programs?
Well, you need to be able to switch between Zoom, between wherever you read your email, and between a web browser, which is where your vote will be cast.
Alan?
Could you please indicate on the delegates website which items have been withdrawn?
Yes, we'll put that withdrawn, and we're trying to mark things with new, but withdrawn is another word we need to add. Thank you, sir. I will make that note. Excellent. Anything else? Well, once again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being delegates. Thank you for everything that you do for ethical culture in the AEU. It's so appreciated. And we'll see you very soon. Have a great weekend. No meetings. It's good.
Good job, Carolyn.
Great